Welcome everyone. This is the 25-minute session with the exam question: Can blockchain accelerate financial inclusion in Africa? My name is Andrew Nevin. I'm adjusting my screen so that it doesn't fall over here on that. Fantastic lineup today. Very quickly, let me introduce who we've got on our panel, and then we'll get right into it. So let me start out. We've got Michelle Chivunga is one of Africa's top blockchain experts. She has so many things on her CV. My head was going to explode when I saw that. We'll hear from her in a moment. We have Vinny Lingham, who is a dragon, an angel, and a shark all together, but I'm told that he's supposed to be the nice dragon. So welcome, Vinny, to this. We have Arthur, who's the CEO and founder of PyBlock, which is trying to do something really extraordinary, tying together KYC, identity, blockchain, AI, all together to serve the bottom of the pyramid. And we have, finally, we have John Staley. I haven't heard from John. He's on the call. He's muted at the moment, but he had a long, successful career with Equity Bank in Nigeria. Nigeria is my home, in Kenya, which is really the most innovative bank. And he was the one who was in charge of innovation there and drove so many of the things. And I think the last few years he's been doing things in blockchain still out in East Africa. So welcome, John. And John is unmuted, so I hope we can hear him in a moment. Say something, John, so we know you're here.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me.
Fantastic, John. Good to see you. Okay, so we only got 25 minutes. I got an eye on the clock here. But let me start with Michelle as the woman and incredibly famous Africa blockchain expert. I'm looking at my notes sometimes, so don't mind me. But Michelle, I'm going to ask each of the panelists, starting with you, just to spend 2 or 3 minutes about what your view is on this issue of is blockchain something that is really going to accelerate financial inclusion in Africa? So Michelle, over to you to start.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Andrew. Yes, I think blockchain can play a big role in supporting financial inclusion. But before actually jumping on to blockchain, I think there's a number of factors that need to be looked into. Africa, I think we have significant opportunities moving forward, especially when we talk about the continental free trade area and the excitement that's coming with that. But then we have to worry about things like connectivity issues, infrastructure, and basic stuff like that. But I think with blockchain, one of the most exciting things is that the level of trust and transparency that blockchain can bring into the system is actually quite exciting. And through that, I think then you'll be able to start to filter in opportunities for trade and for business to flow a little bit better. And that, again, will result into better financial inclusion. Now, more specifically around financial inclusion, when we start to explore new innovative payment models, new innovative payment systems, the growth in e-commerce, all that I think is going to help with filtering in more financial inclusion. But there are a number of steps I think that we need to take beforehand before we fully deploy in things like blockchain. But it is starting to happen already. Blockchain is already being utilized across Africa in certain sectors and areas.
Okay, I'll come back to you a little bit, Michelle. We'll go deeper into that. I want to turn to John now. John, you were at what is, many argue, the most innovative bank in Africa for a long time, and you were the executive director that did the innovation. So, but you did it in a period when blockchain, as far as I know, was not really coming to the fore. Now, the last few years, you've left Equity Bank. How are you thinking about blockchain, and what are you doing to kind of use blockchain to drive financial inclusion? John.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, I think Michelle highlighted a few crucial aspects about connectivity and infrastructure. That is still a major concern of mine, and I'm actually spending a lot more time on coming up with free Wi-Fi models because until we actually get connectivity in the market, I think we're going nowhere. People assume everybody's connected. That's not the case. In Kenya, 80% of the population spends $1 on airtime a month. When you spend $1 on airtime, you can't connect. Secondly, I don't believe blockchain is going to solve the payment issue. And I'm still extremely concerned about payments. I mean, we've seen some glimmers of light with things like Lipa na M-Pesa, but in actual fact, payments at the bottom of the pyramid are not happening electronically. They're happening in cash. We've had some nice examples in Rwanda where the government has forced the MNOs to do payments over the COVID period. But other than that, and in Kenya, other than that, we are not seeing electronic payments taking off. We've seen cross-border working, but we're not seeing micropayments working. 85% of all transactions in Kenya are under $5. Of those, 90% are still happening in cash. We got nowhere near solving the payments issue. And I don't believe blockchain is going to do that, given it's how it works. But I am excited about blockchain. So I have been spending a lot of time on crypto identity and very pleased to see what Mark is doing. I think identity is absolutely crucial. And I think blockchain can play a huge role in identity. And I've been spending time with the likes of Diana Adachi and Greg Kidd looking at global ID. I think that's huge coming forward. I think land registry, massive. Land ownership is a key issue in Africa, and if people are going to get uplifted, they need to own their land. So I think blockchain can play a huge role in land registry. And the one that excites me the most is in secure supply chains. I think, in both health and agriculture, we have huge counterfeit goods. And in a lot of cases, particularly in the health sector, they're placebos, they're useless. And I really believe blockchain can play a major part in securing the supply chains. So yeah, I could carry on for quite a while, but I think those are the three areas of which I would like to highlight.
Okay, we'll come back on that, particularly around this obsession with payments and the fact that there actually, according to you, hasn't been as much progress as people think. So let me jump to Vinny now. So Vinny, I have it on good authority that you would like to eliminate the banks. And correct me if I've misspoken here on that. So talk to us a little bit about what you're doing over at Civic and how you see blockchain as part of the solution for the bottom of the pyramid and a different kind of way of financial services.
Thanks, Andrew. I think, look, eliminating banks is not really going to happen. If you look at where we are right now, the point of blockchain is really it's moving from, and crypto, it's moving from custodial services to non-custodial services. A bank is a custodial service. They hold your funds. You have an account with them. They regulate it. They have to have proof of reserves, proof of funds, etc. And things like Bitcoin and other cryptos are really self-custody solutions. So at Civic, we focused on doing identity verification, digital identity, and creating, we have a Bitcoin wallet right now that allows you to store Bitcoins in a non-custodial service, which means that no one can really touch your coins, and you can't go through haircuts like what's happened in Cyprus in the past and other banking sectors. So the problem with regulated entities is that they are regulated. So if you take a global macro view on things, you have to appreciate that. If your funds are with a custodial service, they're subject to the laws and regulations of the country. And I think the beauty of something like Bitcoin is it's non-custodial and you can self-custody funds. Now, the problem really in crypto in general and Bitcoin in particular is that the fees are really high for transferring funds around and coins around. So, you've got to deal with that issue as well. So I think blockchains are a long way to go for it to be relevant in Africa, especially from a fees perspective. You can't have people paying more in fees than they earn in a month to just do a simple transaction. And that's a scaling issue. So you then go into the scaling debacles around cryptocurrencies. But for now, Bitcoin is pretty good rich people money, as I call it. It's money for people who have money. It's not really a bottom of the pyramid type solution. You've got other sort of more emerging cryptocurrencies that could possibly fall that gap. But then they've got security issues. They've got scaling issues to resolve as well. So there's always a trade-off. We call it the scaling trilemma, where you're trading off, cost, security, and effectively just scale to figure out, how to make it relevant globally. So I think blockchain, and crypto is very nascent as a technology still, but it's got its use cases. So if you focus on specific use cases around blockchain, like we focus heavily on identity for the past couple of years. We've built identity.com. We've got a marketplace ecosystem, there, and we think it's going to play out over many years. I don't think there's going to be wake up next year and there'll be a solution.
Okay, understood. That's how. So now I guess I'm going to turn to Mark. He also works kind of the intersection of payments, but also identity over Pi Block that you founded. So, Mark, is Vinny is he a frenemy? Is he a friend? Is he an enemy? Are you competitors? What are you doing over at Pi Block about identity? Because at the end of the day, I mean, I grew up in a world where I never thought about my identity. I was born, given a birth certificate, actually born in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, turned it into a Canadian passport, Canadian citizenship, etc. Never thought much about it. And now you understand actually not having identity affects hundreds of millions of people in Africa. So what's the view from you, Mark, on this and what your company is doing about it?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, at PayBlog, we spent the past 10 years building a platform that is essentially revolving around digital banking, payments, and sovereign ID. Those are the three things that we really have been working, and most crucial the past 10 years. And we believe that the three things really work together. So we can't take them apart. And you can't do digital banking without ID. You can't do payment without ID era. And that's the reason why, as John was saying, I think that payment is not really going digital in Africa right now. And we always have this impression that there's a lot of SMS payment going on. And but when you start going into statistics, you realize that there's not really much going on. So it's just the beginning. And of course, blockchain is not really going to solve the problem. The problem in terms of payment. Blockchain is not really meant for that. But if you go in and start looking into what is financial inclusion, I mean, financial inclusion means different things to different people. And for me, it comes down to being able to provide individuals and businesses with access to useful and affordable financial products, and that are sustainable and responsible. This is what it comes down to. And being able to have access to a transaction account is a first step towards a broader financial inclusion. So there is no financial inclusion without a transaction account. And I think that this is the first thing that every country that is interested in really narrowing that gap will have to work with, helping people create or open a transaction account, because this is the beginning of everything. And a payment account has absolutely nothing to do with financial inclusion. So you can have a means to pay, John was mentioning PESA, but that doesn't mean that it is financial inclusion. If you don't have a transaction account that can sort of develop into mortgage at some point in time, develop into credit, and provide you more access to financial products, which are essentially laying down on mainstream banking and not with crypto and blockchain. So this is a bit where it comes down to me. It comes down to, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so it's interesting. Let me go back to Michelle. So Michelle, you've heard the other panel, the male panelists. I'll state the obvious, maybe not politically correct, say, and John has really sort of said, look, blockchain not relevant right now for payments. Connectivity is. Vinny has said that Bitcoin is money for rich people, money for people who already have money. Mark has said, similar thing, not clear about blockchains. I mean, you're perhaps the leading blockchain expert in Africa right now. And I know you're consulting with lots of private sector and public organizations. What's your reaction to that? I mean, do you see blockchain as something that's, can really be used for payments for the bottom of the pyramid, or the best use cases elsewhere as you look around the continent?
I've got kind of mixed views and responses to that. Some of it, yes, I kind of agree with that. With any new technology, it's not going to happen overnight. When we had the internet, for example, we had several phases up until we all got familiar with the internet, or we started sending emails and things like that. So I think in terms of the development of blockchain as a technology is going to take quite some time. We have issues around interoperability, we have issues around scalability, we've got issues around, just kind of getting people aware and to understand how they can actually utilize the technology. So we still have a long way to go before we can actually have a mature technology, number one. But I think there is significant opportunities for blockchain in certain sectors, like I said in my opening address. So when you look at pharmaceuticals, when you look at counterfeit drugs and things like that, and you being able to utilize a technology that can track and trace, drugs right from source or food right from source, where you know exactly what you're getting the supply chain. Supply chain is a big example of where I see blockchain really going to play a major role, regardless of where it is in the world. Because at the moment, the supply chain is completely clogged. We saw that during COVID. It was very difficult to get PPE, very difficult to know who has PPE, who's going to get PPE. Governments were falling all over each other, left, right, and center, trying to source PPE, trying to source financing. So, the supply chain is completely clogged. And that's one example where you can actually utilize a blockchain more effectively because you can track and trace. And then we tend to speak about blockchain in a lot of, a lot of the time in isolation. In fact, actually, blockchain benefits a lot better when it's integrated with other technologies. So when you're thinking about things like smart cities and you integrate IoT, for example, when you're using machine learning or AI in certain scenarios and you combine and you have those converged opportunities with the technology, then you're starting to see a lot more value. I gave the example of pharmaceuticals. I gave the examples of supply chain. We talked about land. Right? In Africa, land is quite precious to us, right? Title deeds, property ownership, being able to record and put this stuff onto the blockchain, I think is very important. In Africa, yes, we still have, like I said in my opening address, we still have to address a number of issues before we can even look deeply into blockchain. But I don't think that should be a case of, let's wait 10 years or 15 years before we start to look at that, right? It's very important we start to understand the tech now and to see where it's actually relevant. So rather than bringing that as a closing, rather than thinking of it as, we have blockchain, we must use it. No. What's the problem that we're trying to address? Does blockchain actually fit or not? Or is it something else that we're trying to actually sort out, right? So very important, I think, to contextualize a bit.
Okay, so that's very interesting. I mean, of course, John made the same point about the secure supply chain, particularly in the pharmaceuticals, being maybe a better use case right now in Africa. John, I wanted to come back to you though and talk a little bit about this connectivity issue. I feel like we jump forward to talking about payments, we jump forward to talking about IoT, we jump forward to talking about supply chain, blockchain in this conversation. But you started out by saying, unless we solve the connectivity problem, none of this is going to go anywhere. And people have this myth that, of course, Kenyans only use M-Pesa, but you just told us that 90% of transactions under $5 are done in cash, or maybe for 90% of all transactions. Why is there not enough attention paid to the connectivity issue? And what are you kind of doing? That's where you started this conversation. So you must be doing a lot of stuff on that, John.
Yeah, look, I think, Vinny doesn't like banks, and I don't like banks either. And I don't really like telcos because I believe the two of them control the key sectors that actually need to change and bring services. To me, they're almost utilities. Connectivity is a utility. It's like water. It should be, the person should be able to open a tap and get fresh water. They should be able to connect to the internet. And unfortunately, the costs are prohibitive. I mean, even all of the Wi-Fi solutions, and I'm dealing with a lot of them, you're still looking at between $5 and $10 a month. Now, when half the population's living on less than $2, $5 is a significant portion to spend on connectivity. So I think people have assumed that it's happening. And what I learned at Equity, it's not happening. M-Pesa is great. It doesn't use data. It works on USSD and SMS. So yes, it works. And it's worked very well for, what I call them not the last meter problem. If it's the last kilometer, it works. But for the last meter, when you're facing somebody, to hand over cash is a lot easier. So I just, I'm not seeing, I just think we're overlooking the connectivity issue. And I can give you, everybody thinks South Africa, oh, great, got fantastic connectivity. I spend a lot of time in Khayelitsha down in the Cape. I can tell you it's exactly the same as Kibera in Kenya. So until we address...
But let me just ask, before I move on, just on this, John, why is there not enough attention paid to this? Is it the policymakers? Is it the politicians not paying attention? Is it just, we all have this view that connectivity is solved to some extent, right?
I think there's just been too many assumptions made that it's solved without actually getting out there and spending time. I've spent a lot of my time walking the slums of Africa, because until you walk the slums of Africa, you don't know what's happening there. And I can tell you, it doesn't work. You know, people know exactly how much airtime they've got. They know exactly what it can use. They can do so many SMSs and make so many calls. I'm sitting out in the middle of the Kruger Park. You'd all be very jealous at the moment. I could probably see some elephants walking past. And I've loaded 5 gigs onto my modem and it's disappeared.
Right.
You know, and I would say to my wife, who's doing what? And poor people can't afford that. You know, they just can't say, whoopsie, but it's gone. You know, they know. So they will walk to the mall where they can get free Wi-Fi to do their uploads of their apps. Then they'll switch it off because it's too uncontrollable.
Understood.
So
okay, let me just stop you there with an eye on the clock because we're really under the clock here. Vinny, I want to get to you on this. So, you know, you're very involved in this identity issue. Educate the people on this session today about identity. As I said a little earlier, you know, we all make assumptions that identity is there, and yet where do you start with someone who doesn't have an identity? How do you approach it?
So look, there's a number of different approaches here, but you know, if you look at things like DIDs and all the different standards that are emerging, identity really begins with anchoring some sort of attestation to a blockchain in the crypto world, digital identity, and those attestations come from trusted institutions, you know, government, et cetera, et cetera. And all you're trying to do is really digitize physical driver's licenses, physical passports, and make them trusted in the digital world so they cannot be duplicated, replicated. We use biometric technology to do facial recognition and mapping it to physical documents, and we create digital IDs from there. So that, I mean, the technology around this stuff is pretty simple. It's not as simple. It's done. It's not, you know, there's no reinventing the wheel here. The difficulty is the adoption cycle and getting governments and agencies and whoever else to accept that a digital certificate is actually more safer than a physical, you know, printed version of what they think is an identity. And so we're in this weird situation where there's kind of a standoff, I think, between governments and private sector around adopting digital, because the people who work at governments are just not smart enough to understand how the digital work infrastructure
Sorry, so you're telling us that the governments around Africa are still resisting. They want a paper birth certificate. They want paper. Like
that's what
in
they
Nigeria,
know.
we have the WIAC with all sorts of scandals about WIAC certificates. They don't want to put it on the blockchain or put it in digital.
They don't understand technology. The problem with the governments today is most of these people are, you know, are technophobes. They don't get it, and they don't understand how the security model works. They don't understand how, and even if 1 or 2 people in government do, the rest of them don't. So they're busy fighting with each other, and they can't get this done. So, you know, like, I think we're stuck with paper for a long time and plastic for a long time, and that's just the way it is, because it's just, you know, it's legacy, and we're not going to get rid of it easily.
All right, so Mark, let me just ask you. You're also an expert in the same.
By the way, so Andrew, I'm actually from East London originally. So.
Oh, okay, good. Well, we're
I grew up there.
Yeah, I'm a good Port Elizabeth boy. It's a little windy in Port Elizabeth.
I spent a lot of time in PE, but yeah.
Mark, just with an eye on the clock in kind of 1 minute, what you pick up on what Vinny said about identity and how you think about identity and establishing identities around Africa?
Yeah, I mean, a long story short, I think exactly the same thing as Vinny. And you know, according to digital ID and passports and driving license and social security cards, all those things need to go digital. And this is what is a key to the future. And
but are you seeing the same resistance from African governments as Vinny's seeing?
I think that there could be a shortcut. There could be a shortcut, because when we're talking about digitization in Europe or in the US, we're talking about digitizing existing ID assets, which means a passport that exists. When we're talking about digitization in Africa, we're talking about actually being capable of documenting people that don't have a legal identity. That's what we're talking about. So there's really 2 different things. And I think that there is a way that can be done in Africa, and they could set up blockchains, for instance, and, you know, register people on blockchain, and government could equally create things like, central bank cryptocurrency with a national register of the population. So with those 2 blockchains together, they will be able to sort of make a jump start into the future. So you combine a national registry on the blockchain and a central bank cryptocurrency in Africa, and you sort out the problem.
Wow. Okay. Well, I hope it's I've always encouraged Afro-Exim Bank to create a Libra for Africa, because I don't want Facebook to dominate payments in Africa when that works. So, Michelle, eye on the clock. I'm going to give the last minute to you. So I think that you told me that the Africa Union is one of your clients. So you're standing up in front of the Africa Union. His Excellency President Kagame has introduced you as the leading blockchain technology expert, the voice of the future young woman in Africa. You have 1 minute. What do you tell the AU delegates about where to take digitization, take blockchain, take AI, take IoT? Michelle.
Right. This is what thank you very much. This is what I would say, which I have actually already said to the African Union. I think every single African country needs to look at the digital economy with all the things we talked about today, connectivity to affordable data localization laws. All this is very, very important in order for us to set the bedrock, for us to bring in emerging technologies. Emerging technologies include blockchain, AI, cybersecurity, absolutely, paramount for every country. But at the heart of it, I think, which we don't talk so much about, it's about, educating and raising awareness, even to the level where we're educating our heads of state, our politicians, our governments to actually, listen to maybe even younger people like myself, because in this space of digital, I think you have to understand how to actually utilize these technologies. Because if you don't have the understanding of how to apply these technologies, then you either pack it aside or you ban it. A lot of countries in Africa have completely banned cryptocurrency. There is no, room to even discuss cryptocurrency. Digital currencies, we did an event in Nigeria. There was very little kind of response, I think, from government side. I think we have to start to talk about these and get some education around in capacity building.
All right, thank you. And of course, you sped up speaking because you only had 1 minute. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to Mark Arthur, who's the CEO and co-founder 10 years ago of PyBlock, which works on digital identity, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. Thank you so much to John Staley, who did amazing things at Equity Bank and has now got to the heart of the issue. None of this is going to move forward unless we improve connectivity in Africa. Thank you to Vinny Lingham, who's a serial entrepreneur, founder of Civic, working in the same space. Dragon, angel, shark, as I said, but again, we'll stress he's a nice guy. And have I missed anyone? And thank you so much to Michelle Chivunga, who's one of the leading blockchain experts in Africa. As you said, she's ready to give this. I think she's probably already given the speech to the AU. I'm Andrew Nevin. We're out of time, I think. Thank you so much for joining. I learned so much in this panel. And God bless Africa.